Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tiff Talks Tech. Today, I am excited because I have Michael Bowman with me, who is the CEO of Resident Radius, and we're going to be talking about managing the unmanageable and how technology can help streamline move in and move out and how it can reduce evictions and collections loss. I know that was a lot, but I'm really excited to cover this topic. Before we really dive in, Michael, can you just give me a little bit about what you do and what you do at Resident Radius and what inspired you?
Yeah, thanks, Tiff. I'm technically CEO and founder. I started the company about 8 years ago. Um, I do more than I should, is what I'm told by most everybody in my organization, because I have a little bit of a control freak, but I like to be involved in every aspect of the organization and what we do. So I'm everything on the development side all the way through HR and ultimately sales, obviously. So yeah, it's been an interesting 8 years building a software platform and learning from experience, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. How did you come to focus on using that technology for tasks like move out processing, eviction mitigation, deposit compliance?
Yeah, so it's interesting when we first were looking at what solutions were missing. I really leveraged my operational experience, having been the bulk of my experience being on the operator side. I started at the site level a long time ago, and when I finally had transitioned over to the vendor side, I got wooed away. The two biggest issues that we were focused on were really collections and deposits. And at the time, surety bonds were pretty prolific and very negative in the space because of the resident experience and the operational complexities. And so when I left, I actually ended up going onto the collection side to a third party provider, hoping that I could change the way that that was done. And I learned a lot. I learned that in order to actually affect real change, you actually had to do it yourself. And
Mm.
so I kind of threw some stuff at a whiteboard and was trying to think of what my next evolution would be. And I realized that what was missing was an affordable option to the deposit conundrum, right?
Yeah.
It's a barrier of entry. It's a complexity in the leasing staff, understanding and marketing, and it's uncomfortable to have a
Yeah.
conversation with a future resident, right? And so that's really what led to the concept of Deposit Cloud, which was our core product and original namesake. Um, it dovetailed into eviction mitigation and all of the compliance factors that exist out there with deposits today.
Kind of coming back just a little bit, can you tell me? I know you said you started on the operator side. Can you tell me a little bit about that and like your experience and just some of the things that you saw that contributed to this problem that people are seeing?
Absolutely. I had the benefit of starting at the site level. So
Yeah.
my very first experience was an 82 unit guard style community in Burbank, California, and
Uh,
kind of fell into it. And I won't go into the funny
don't we
story
all?
of that now, but yes, it was absolutely not intentional. But
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it, and I'm a bit handy, and so I had started renovating units and managing the property, and learned a lot as I worked through the organization. It was a small owner operator. We got absorbed through property acquisitions, and I ended up going to work for Pinnacle, now Cushwake. Um, and again, started off regionally and then ended up being over the West Coast, and then had an opportunity to build out the project management division for the global entity, and that really is what propagated my experiences in the tech side more so than anything else. I had helped with implementations of technology, websites, screening, and things, but it wasn't
Yeah.
until I really got involved in the project management piece that I really understood more of those complexities. So fast forwarding to towards the end of my operations experience, I recognized that there were a lot of complaints, confusion, and misunderstandings around the way that surety bonds worked and the way that they were being utilized. And so I was tasked with uh, essentially reviewing our current programs and determining how beneficial they were. And maybe it was a training issue, maybe it was a gap in marketing. The deeper I got, I understood that, the legacy surety bond of yesteryears was very misleading to the consumer. Pay $100, you get $1,000, and it just was
Mm,
never properly related. But it also created complexity on all levels of the operations side, where you had to deal with what type of move-in did the resident have? Did they pay a deposit? Did they pay a deposit alternative? What are the legislative requirements around those options in every state? And so as I was looking at, you know, how do you evaluate a product like that, I really
yeah.
had to look at the resident experience, the resident impact, the resulting impact to the organization or the property, the brand, the reputation, and then, what were the training requirements? What were the responsibilities at the site level, at the regional, at the operator level, corporate? And there's the thing that I think is so unique and interesting about security deposits is that it truly impacts every single layer of the organization, from the prospect, i.e. resident, all the way up through corporate and ultimately accounting. And there's almost always a disconnect between the property team and the accounting team, or regionals or operations and the accounting team. There's assumptions made, right? Oh, accounting takes care
Yeah.
of that. But the complexity and how much work that is often overlooked. And so that's really what lent itself to me wanting to solve for all of those issues.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to dive into a little bit of like talking about using technology for those uncomfortable things. Like you said, there's so much that goes into it on the site level as well. But how can technology help property management companies handle the move in and move out process more efficiently?
Yeah, I would say that obviously we built a solution to do that.
Yeah.
Um, the technology piece is understanding that there is no one fix. There's
Yeah.
no full automation. It just doesn't exist today, because what we've been faced with is the lack of enhanced or innovation in PMS softwares, right?
Hmm.
The property
Yeah.
management software systems are legacy APIs, right? They're tired APIs. A couple of the software platforms have introduced new developer portals that's going to allow additional functionality. But at the end of the day, today, right, there is a human element that has to be involved in the move out process. Now, we can absolutely streamline and remove the headache and hassle of the common place, the mailing of move out statements, the inbound calls and communications, expediting the refund process. But ultimately it's on the site level, or, well, at the very least the site level, to complete the move out, and then potentially a centralized corporate division that will actually audit and make sure that the move out statement is complete and accurate. um, Introducing technology into the works that will create a smoother resident onboarding experience, adding, payment options. If you look back in, 15 years ago, security deposit, it was a money order, a cashier's check.
Yeah.
That was it, right? Go to
Yeah.
7-Eleven, go to the grocery store. You got to get 8 cashier's or money orders, right? Today, we use a variety of payment options. We have ACH, we have credit, debit, Venmo, Google Pay, Apple Pay, PayPal, Cash, even Cash App. And so by providing those additional payment methods, I mean, you look at the demographics, the different age ranges, and the
Yeah.
propensity of, you talk to any of the last few decades of generations, they don't have checks. They don't go to a bank and pull
No.
cash out and get a cashier's check, right? I mean, it's by being able to innovate and provide modern day conveniences like electronic payment methods, not just inbound, but also on the refund side of it, post move out,
Mm,
is exponentially beneficial. So property management companies that are looking to streamline, there's two really sound methods. One is a technology stack similar to ours or like us that can help do that and take all that burden administratively, compliance, legalities, all that off the plate. The second piece of it is potentially in tandem with the first, but it's centralizing. We hear that centralizing is such a huge buzz, and what does it mean? The reality is that a lot of the centralizing is around the leasing and the property operations flow. It's very difficult to centralize a specific task within a property management company
hmm.
like move out processing, because you don't necessarily have the consistency and the volume to justify full-time
Yeah.
employees that manage just that one factor. So our software platform lends itself to both operators being able to centralize the tasks, but also streamline and create compliance and consistency in it. So it's an interesting topic because pre-COVID, technology was very slow to adopt in
Yeah.
multifamily. We just
Yeah.
didn't do it. It was, I mean, I don't want to date myself, but I remember when we were, paper ledgers and Rolodexes and hard card, resident binders. So
Yeah.
we've come a long way, but there's still more room that we have to evolve as an industry.
Yeah, and you said something that I think resonated. Like you were saying, we're always going to have that human aspect. And I think the more I talk with people, like we have all this really amazing technology coming out, but it's really just kind of changing the way that we work and the way that we think. Like I would never have thought to have a person just doing move-ins and move outs. But when you said that, I know it's not a thing really right now, but I could see that becoming a thing with the way technology, like we might move that route. So I think, yeah, that's a really good point. What are some of the biggest challenges that property managers face with late rent payments and collections? And how does technology like yours come in and help solve for that? I mean, I know we hear that all the time. Assistant property managers are going knocking on doors, and it's just like very old school. So is there anything else that can help with that?
Yeah, I think that any platform that lends itself to, and there's a number of them out there. We have a channel partner
Yeah.
that they provide those services to help with like existing resident balances or late payments and the centralizing the communication. I think that what the nuance to technology is the actual task.
Yeah.
Not many of the property management systems have an ability to create tasks based on certain factors. We built out a platform that has not launched yet. It's coming in Q1, 2 of next year that that will pull data and create tasks based on policies. Um, Having somebody that can do that within the organization to help centralize a task for that, anything that we can do to remove the hassle and headache from
Yeah.
monotonous tasks from the site level. Obviously, I can tell you emphatically, when I was on the operator side, we were always implementing new solutions,
Yeah.
and the number of eye rolls from the site level teams, because they are the ones that ultimately get the burden of all these things. So
Yeah.
less is more. So when you can introduce a solution that truly removes the burden from the site level teams and provides additional benefits, it's a big win. With specifically around those pieces is having people that are not directly in relation to the residents is absolutely beneficial. Through COVID, we've supported unpaid rent and eviction mitigation through third-party payment plans, right? So we built
Mm.
out a solution to address it right at the beginning of the pandemic. It's still being used today, surprisingly. I literally thought we were like wasting development money to build out the solution that was going to be like a 3 or 4 month deal. And here we are in almost 2025, and we're still rolling out on new properties the same solution. The benefit is that our team and our support teams, they're all trained with empathy training and conflict
Mm.
resolution, and they don't have a direct relation to the resident. And so the way that the residents speak to or communicate with those people not at the property is significantly different than, well, the mean manager doesn't like me, right? So
Yeah.
so it is beneficial to have outside help in those tasks.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I love that you said they have like empathy training, and that's just something I don't think we hear enough about. So I think that's really cool. I want to talk a little bit about third party managed deposits and their impact. How do they change the way that we manage evictions, collections, and late payments?
Yeah, so it's kind of the carrot or the stick approach, right? In the old ways of managing uh, deposits and resident move outs, I'll blame surety bonds of the yesteryear as
Yeah.
part of the problem, because where we saw, and this predates you obviously, but there used to be first months, last months, uh,
Yeah.
as a deposit, right? You had these
Right.
massive out-of-pocket obligations, and the advent of the surety bond really pushed the acceptable security deposit down. In fact, today the average deposit nationally is less than $400. Conversely, the average move out is about $580. So we preset the expectation that a resident moving out is going to have a balance due. Doesn't really lend itself to a positive experience for the resident, because if they're moving, there's a life change. They got married, they got
Yeah.
divorced, they had a baby, they had a death in the family, they had a job change or school change. So they're moving into something that's going to have a new financial burden and obligation to them. Maybe they, have a new deposit to pay. Maybe they have a new first month's rent. They have utility deposits. So all those things, the move out balance isn't as important to them. And so it goes into the collection cycle. And whether you use a platform like PayReady that has first party and third party collections and does it nicely, right? Or if you have the site level manager calling up the past resident and asking for the balance, or it's going to go to the third party collection agency, right? It, those preemptive solutions to negate that is directly impacted by the deposit. So when we manage a security deposit, we actually manage using what we call dynamic deposits, and it aligns with fair housing and most state statutory requirements or restrictions on deposits. It's a factor of lease rate. So we use the screening result and the lease rate to calculate and determine the deposit amount. And then there's optionality around that, installment plans or prepaid, and then the payment options. So what we do is we look at historic move out balances, and we try to essentially create a deposit that is going to lend itself to refundability at move out.
Hmm.
And so if you refunding balances, you don't have balances going into collections, or at the very least, you have far less going into collections because the deposit's substantially higher. The other interesting factor to that is what I call the psychology of leasing. The
Hmm.
lower the barrier of entry, the less desirable of occupancy you're going to have. So if it's easier to get into a property, hey, move in now, it's $99 move-in special,
Hmm.
and you can pay $15 a month for a surety bond. Well, the type of resident that's going to jump on that opportunity is not necessarily the one that's going to live in the unit over a year or leave the unit clean and undamaged, right? The opposite side of that is if you increase the deposit obligation and the barrier of entry is higher, but you make it affordable, either through deposit insurance or the installment plan, then the quality of occupancy is going to be better. You're going to have residents that live in the unit longer. They're going to do less damage. We remind them before they move out. As soon as a resident turns to notice, we automatically send out a note to the resident saying, "Hey, sorry to see you go. Just a reminder, you have $1,000 deposit. Here's all the things you should do before you move out." Right? To maximize the deposit return and set reasonable expectations. And so residents moving out that either have no balance due or get a refund are obviously going to be happier and more likely to leave a positive review for the property.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm thinking a little bit about like the third party deposit alternatives. Do they play a risk for property managers, especially with delinquent accounts? I know you said like you could contact the property, but they're not physically on site with them. So does that play any risk into it about like getting the money that they're owed or anything like that?
Yeah, it depends on the product.
Yeah.
There's absolutely a risk involved in deposit alternatives.
Yeah.
More so, it's brand impact. I think because a lot of our industry is unique. There's only one product out there right now that I'm aware of that is a true insurance product. They're one of our channel partners, which is LeaseLock, and it's an actual insurance product that doesn't subrogate. Almost every other product that I'm aware of has some type of subrogation, whether it's through the reassurer or it's the entity itself. And I think the misunderstanding is what's most dangerous for the operators. Is if you're selling to a renter that rather than paying a $1,500 deposit, they can pay $15 a month through this third party, and then at move out they'll be covered. The fine print is that yes, the property is covered, but the resident is not, because they're going to have to repay whatever is paid out from the surety bond company. And so it's setting the reasonable expectations, or the resident understanding what they're truly signing up for I think is paramount. And making sure as an owner or operator that the services and products that you're buying into are truly what you believe them to be. There can be exceptions, there can be caps, there can be a number of components to it. The difficulty in submitting a claim, or the complexity operationally in managing multiples, right? Because if you have a resident that goes in and drops off a cashier's check to the property, and then the next resident signs up for a deposit alternative, the way you track those, what happens if the manager's gone and you have an assistant in and they don't know to file a claim, right? What percentage of claims are not filed? It's actually really high. Nationally, claims just don't get filed because there isn't a mechanism that supports that. Aside from our platform, because we manage the deposit alternatives if the operator's using them, but there isn't a way inside of the property management system to track those deposit alternatives, the timing related to when they can file a claim or when they can't, and information like that.
That makes sense. So how can technology jump in and help with reducing that risk when they're in the middle of transitioning from traditional deposits, and also making sure that we comply with local laws?
I think the local laws, the state, city, county, the statutory changes are probably the biggest component. There's a number of active bills in legislation across the U.S. that are going to impact or impede owners and operators related to security deposits. It could be anywhere from interest bearing to changing the terms of notification. Like I'll use Florida as an example because it's one of the more difficult states around security deposits. If you have a resident that moves out and they have a balance, you're required by law to send the demand for payment, or the essentially that you're filing against a deposit alternative, or you're deducting from the deposit. You have to send that in certified mail. Can you imagine the amount of time that it takes the site level
Yeah.
teams to print everything out, do a folder, so it's, technology can help in the essence of services like our deposit cloud product or similar, that if they provide for the physical mailing and the compliance around those. We spent 7 years building out the the compliance matrix on the back end for our system to ensure that our clients are protected from the, not sending out the notification in the statutory required timeline, or the proper notification or wording, or the proper method in notification. I think that the key to implementing technology to reduce the risk is really in mapping out and understanding that, one, any supplier partner that an operator chooses, you have to understand the complexity and the timeline involved in rolling out. If a service provider says, hey, we can roll you out in a week, run away, right? Because it just doesn't happen like that. We make mistakes. The important is owning up to it and making sure that you protect from future mistakes, right? So we've learned our lessons in the way that we roll out. We roll new residents onboarding into the system first. We help the site level teams with the marketing and the orientation and understanding. And then about 2 weeks later, we convert all the existing residents and the sheetment over to our platform. And we've found that way is less risky in both overwhelming the site level teams, right? So they're like, we got relief. Oh, we're going to get more relief. So they get this two-prong approach to reducing the amount of work that they have. But it also allows for operational smoothness, right? Because you can implement part of your solution and ensure that everything is running smoothly. And then the next step is to implement the secondary portion of it. So it's being cautious. I always, my sales team says the same thing now. I jokingly tell folks that if we're going to get married, we need to date first. So we never roll out a whole portfolio day one. We're always going to roll a percentage of the portfolio, make sure everything's running smoothly, and then implement the additional properties. And so I would just say, I think that if I had to summarize it, I would say, be cautious and be thorough in understanding the solution and the impact to the organization at every layer. If you're implementing just a deposit alternative, then there's going to be complexities that you have to account for. It's going to be, how do you address it at the site level? It's going to be, how do you organizationally address it as a operator at the corporate level? What impact does accounting have? And then layer in, where are those legislative restrictions or requirements around that solution or that product? Every state is unique. There's no consistency. There's no standards. So you have to make sure that you're addressing and being aware of the changes that are coming.
Definitely. That makes sense. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about how cash management and deposit alternative compliance works, and what benefits that has to property management teams.
Yeah, so they're not dissimilar, but they have separate components to it. So when you talk about cash management, specifically around security deposits, again, there's state nuances, right? You have states like Washington and Oregon that require an operator to daily reconcile and report transfers. So I'll zoom out, it's probably overly detailed, but if somebody goes to rent an apartment and they're managing, the property is managing the deposit traditionally, and that renter has $1,000 rent and a $500 deposit, they pay $1,500. It goes into the property's operating account. Well, the accounting team has to then move that $500 from the property operation account over to their security deposit account. They have to reconcile that in their accounting books. They have to make sure that it's referenced in the property management system, and then they have to report to the state those transfers and changes. That can be very time consuming. So there's like Department of Real Estate, right? There's the number of requirements in different states based off of the collection of those cash deposits. A lot of the legislation is triggered off of an owner or an operator charging a deposit, collecting and holding those funds. So if you have a third-party provider that does that, it eliminates a huge chunk of the liability and the hassle, right? On the other side of it, when you're looking at deposit alternatives, I'll use Washington as an example too. There's legislation in place in Washington that if you offer a deposit alternative, you actually have to have the resident or the prospective resident attest to the fact that they have read the policy, they've been provided a copy of the policy, they understand, everything about it, and they have to sign off on it. That's another operational complexity, right? That if you don't have a provider like us, the site level teams have to manage and make sure that they're doing that. At an operator level, how do you know that the site level teams are actually doing it, right? And so compliance around the deposit alternative piece can be very difficult to obtain. The other factor to that is, like we talked about in Florida or in other states that have specifics required around the deposit alternative. You got Atlanta that has a renter's choice legislation that requires that a property either provide a prepaid deposit option, an installment option, or a deposit alternative option.
Hmm.
It's two of the three that are required in the way that law is worded. But if you don't happen to offer the payment plan or you don't offer the deposit alternative, then you could be at risk. And so ensuring that every property runs within the compliance components is absolutely difficult. The more difficult aspect of that is ensuring that each property human component is following the policies and procedures to offer that consistently, because the other risk is for housing. If you don't offer the options to every single resident, regardless of race, gender, age, right, then you're at risk. And it's very difficult as an operator with existing just property management system and legacy processes like cash deposits or cashier's check deposits, to ensure that they're doing that.
Okay, for sure. So when people are trying to implement technology like this, I know we talked a little bit about rolling it out, but are there common issues that may pop up when trying to implement technology like this? And how do you overcome that when you are in the middle of it?
Yeah, there are absolutely issues that pop up. If anyone that tells you otherwise is lying to you. So,
Yeah.
I think that the most complex piece of implementation is that every operator is different. Every operator has different policies, has different
Yeah.
procedures, has different people that are attached to different roles and responsibilities. And so, one, ensuring that you understand equally both the supplier partner and the operator, what the expectations are, who the task holders are, and the timeline is critical. Understanding that no matter what timeline you put in place, that it's going to change at some point in the process. And then I think lastly to that is, based on the property management system, there are inabilities in some software systems to support specific tasks that others do have. You can have a property management system that has an automated ability to pull the final move out statement where others don't, or you can have customization in one property management system with one operator and not have the same customization with another operator. So you have to have a dynamic environment as a software or a system services provider to be able to support the potential of variations or changes. We learned during COVID that you have to be able to evolve or you die. There's just
Yeah.
there's no way to have a static system, and I'm probably not like a lot of the vendor side folks, because I still am very operator minded. Um, I any supplier partner that tells an operator what they have to do or what they're doing wrong, is not going to be successful, because operators have been doing it a long time. They're consistent in their approach. They know their business. And while they may understand your software system, they have their own needs and wants and their own focus. And so you have to be able to be dynamic, and be supportive enough. You have to have a customizable solution. And I think my developers absolutely don't agree with me because, I've created more complexity in our system by virtue of customization. But it was a necessity for me. That was one of the paramount factors of our build, is that, every layer of it has customization. And, today we have a system that is very robust, but it is extremely customizable, from branding to messaging to scripting, even the agent scripting in our system that's tied to an owner and operator is editable and changeable for each of
Yeah.
those. So I think that's important. I think that supplier partners have to be able to innovate, but also remain malleable.
Yeah.
That we built out a advisory board that is comprised of industry leaders and, obviously clients, but first and foremost, we wanted to make sure that the folks that were on that group had different experience in our industry and could lend to the continued innovation. And I think that that's the other factor, is that, owners and operators that are looking to implement technology need to ensure that the technology that they're going to or looking to implement is able to support their existing environment, but enhance it.
That's a very good point. And I love that you guys have an advisory board. I feel like that is one of the things that keeps us vendor partners in the loop and what's current and understanding the processes. I mean, I know you came from the operator side, but the fact that you're still seeking out feedback from others in the industry to make the product even better, I think it speaks volumes for sure.
Yeah, as much as we like to think that we retain, everything that we know, our
Yeah.
experiences are relative and relevant now. I've learned a lot over the last. It's unique because I think that I've always had the operator mindset when we approach business, but even today, when we have conversations, whether it's with the advisory board or an individual client, there's still changes, right? There's still nuances
Right.
within each operator. There's still, no one saw COVID coming, right? And that was a huge change
Yeah.
in the way that we do business on both sides.
Absolutely. Do you have any success stories that really just speak to how solutions like this have transformed business for people? Like, I know obviously it's saving them time and making things easier. And I think sometimes we have solutions out there that they make it so easy that the on-site team kind of forgets that they exist. But like, how do products like this really change things?
Yeah, I mean, I like to think that every client that we bring on is a success story. But
Yeah.
I mean, we've never lost a client in 8 years, which I think is a testament to the quality and consistency of our work.
Never, not
We
once?
never, not once. Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah. I think that, part of that is that, if we will make mistakes. Like, there's just no way.
Yeah.
Taking responsibility for the mistakes, and then again being supportive and being willing to continuously evolve and customize to meet, client needs is important. And I would say, like, I can go back to our very, very first client on the platform that, took a risk on us and said, hey, we're willing to try it out. They have been an amazing partner. They have helped build out our platform. It'd be great if it did this, or I would great if it did
Yeah.
this. Oh, this is happening, right? And that's really what even led to the advisory uh, board being created. Was we had so much consistent innovation ideas from existing clients. Some of it was directly related to friction, right? It was, oh, hey, this happened. How do we prevent it from happening again? And so I think that, for me, is I take, maybe it's an alternative thought, but, I take our failures as achievement, because every time that we learn how not to do something, we make what we learn how to do it right or better um, exponentially greater. And so I think you have to embrace your failures, learn from them, and continuously innovate to stay relevant, because the systems or the solutions out there that have not changed or not evolved are the ones that definitely will fall by the wayside.
I think that is such a great point, and I think I need to start looking at it that way because when I fail at something, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm the worst." But I think looking at it as that kind of learning opportunity is such a good reminder, and it also, like I said, it speaks a lot to the way that you guys are doing things because those vendors who can really sit and listen to their customers and say, "Oh, that's actually a really great point. Let me take that into consideration." Those were always my favorite to work with. If you can at least take my suggestion seriously, then you can have my business all day. So I think that's amazing.
Thank you.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. In closing, just a little bit, I do have a bonus question, and this is unrelated to the topic, but this is something that I ask every single one of my guests. Is there a tech tool that you are loving right now that you recommend to people and does not have to be related to this? Like it could be your Apple Watch, but is there something you're loving?
Well, I did. Boy, I'd have to narrow it down. I give two things. I absolutely love, if you haven't heard of Plaud, Plaud AI. It's a note-taking tool. It's a really great tool that uses ChatGTP to convert the recording so that you can put the
Ooh.
notes into usable method. It actually even does a mind map. It's a really cool and handy tool to use. Um, the second one that I would say that would really impact or be useful in our industry that we have recently been using was a peer referral, and it's a software platform called Arcade. And I think it's arcade.software is the website, but it's a really cool screen recording tool that actually accentuates like screen click, like mouse clicks and typing, and you can actually type in voiceover and select the voice that you want it to speak in. It's a really neat tool for demos, for walkthroughs, for recordings, for training. So that would be the biggest thing that I've been nerding out over.
That's a really cool one. I'll have to check that out for sure.
Yeah.
Um, well, as we close out, are there any final thoughts that you want to share with people? Where can people find you and connect with you and learn more about what you're doing?
Absolutely. Sales at residentradius.com is the email address for our sales team. Anyone that knows Wade McGowan or Gabriella Jones, those are two SVPs of national sales. They can reach out directly to them through LinkedIn, or they would get them through that sales at residentradius.com. So our website's the same, residentradius.com. You can check out all the information on our page too.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you so much for all that information and for sharing with us. I really appreciate it and can't wait for people to learn more.